Let's go. It's gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a good one, bro. Today, it's one of those days, baby. One of those days. Cheers. Yes. Joe. I think I found my new alarm clock. You want to hear it? Would you like to hear it? Here we go.
They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what the fuck they're
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. Guys. What's going on, fam? Welcome. Drop a like, fam. Consider subscribing to the channel. We're coming in. Here it is.
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Our president, ladies and gents, he's getting to NATO right now in Amsterdam. How you doing? Good morning. We got Jerome Powell's statement right now. I got it. Jerome, Fed chair statement. We got him. So we're going to read it right now, which a lot of people are like, are you freaking kidding me, bro? Come on, man. People are like, come on, man. Here it is. So we'll take a look at this one, fam. But once again,
they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
It's like the first F-bomb in a while, right? It's been a while. Oscar for president. No, brother. Not even in Mexico, bro. No. I want to have fun. What's up, JV in the house? John 316 here. What's up, fam? Welcome. It's in Amsterdam, I've heard. It's NATO, yes. Good morning, fam. Good morning. So, prices of crypto, prices of stocks, and prices of a bunch of things. I'm so happy we bought the dip yesterday, man. We're doing really well. Doing really well. BTC right now, Ethereum, XRP, guys. We're doing well. Prices are good. My longs are doing phenomenal right now. I mean, yep. This is what we wanted, right? Like, even if they violate the ceasefire per se, you know, I'm just saying, or even if it doesn't really work much, the nuclear facilities crushed. So it kind of gives us days, it gives us weeks, it gives us months right now. It's like a insurance policy that we're not going to have a nuclear threat and they're not close to building a nuclear bomb. So that to the world and to the market is like, okay, relief. Which I like that. I like that a lot. Kevin in the house, what's up, buddy? Welcome. Looking at the market, it looks like bombing nuclear never happens. Yeah, it's you remove the threat, right? I mean, Israel here. Where is it? Where did I put it? Well, basically, they are already kind of like Iran. We won't break the ceasefire unless Israel does it first. You see? So I think we're just kind of waiting. They really wanted to get those bombs out of their system right now, and we're just waiting, right? Hopefully, when they see this,
They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
When they hear him, I mean, look, that's an F-bomb in front of the cameras. In front of the cameras, right? What do you think he's saying behind the scenes when cameras are off? The guy, you know the guy, bro. Do you know him? He's not pleased. He's not happy, bro. I mean, he's talking to Netanyahu, bro. And he's laying it on him like, hey, dude, what the heck are you doing? So, yeah, I mean, I know that he has to obey Mr. Trump, right? He has to obey Mr. Trump. He has to obey the president of the United States, bro. It's like, come on, dude. Like, look at all the effort. Look at all the B-2 bombers. 37 hours, bro. 37 hours. 37 hours, bro. You know what is not to sleep and be flying a $2 billion aircraft? Nobody here can do it. 0 people here watching. I cannot. Nobody can do it. Just superheroes can do it. Superheroes. So, it's like, come on, man. Just relax. Tobias in the house. What's up, buddy? Welcome. Guys, we're going to be watching Jerome Powell. Let's go ahead and take a look at his testimony too. Question in the chat. He's speaking in about 20 minutes. Less than 20 minutes. Powell knows what he's doing. Powell has no idea what he's doing. Or just cut the raid, man. Just cut the raid, brother. Right? It's called autopilot. Well, I know, Mama. Come on, man. Yeah, I know, I get it, bro. But hey, dude, even in autopilot, bro, no. Oh, no. Wouldn't dare to go anywhere near, right? Every time Oscar with the cranberry juice. I love cranberry juice. Guys, well, here it is. Jerome Powell, Chairman Hill, Ranking Member Waters. No. Maxine Waters is there? No. Please don't tell me Maxine Waters is going to be there. Oh, my goodness. Or is it somebody else? Waters. Monetary Policy Report. Monetary Policy. Maxine Waters. Committee. Financial services. Oh my goodness, bro. It's gonna be nasty, bro. Ugh. Maxine Waters. Man. We'll see what happens. 15 minutes. Crypto, what's up, buddy? Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Make sure you smash the like button and join BTCC. Links down below. We'll be watching. Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on achieving a dual mandate goal of its maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. Inflation has come down a great deal, but has been running somewhat above the 2% longer run objective. Income and data suggest that the economy remains solid and strong. Oh, there it is. We're live. We're live. It's beginning shortly. Let's go. We'll get to this. We'll get to this. Mostly what we want to hear here is the responses, because we're hoping that, I mean, there's going to be a lot of Republicans here. And those Republicans have to be the voice of the president of the United States, right? Because many of them, and I'm sure the Democrats, this is the way I feel like the Democrats are going to be trying to help him not to get fired by President Trump. So we really want to hear everyone's positions here.
I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. And you know, the fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing? They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated, and the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean.
You don't believe that Iran can rebuild its nuclear program?
No, Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers.
Israel says that they violated the
You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace.
We don't need a late night show. We don't need a comedian. We just need Trump, bro. I mean, don't tell me he's the man. He's not the man. I mean, bro, it's everything in one person, bro. Everything in one person, bro. It's like phenomenal, bro. Phenomenal, bro.
I think it's been complete.
Fox has the live. Welcome everybody. It's gonna begin shortly. Make sure you get comfy. We'll be hearing Jerome Powell speak. Gonna be crazy, crazy, crazy.
The reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. Iran will never rebuild its nuclear.
Let me, because they got the mega. Here it is.
Speaking as he is about to leave for the Netherlands.
Went on a mission this morning.
He is about to leave for the Netherlands.
Went on a mission this morning. I got to get Israel to calm down now.
Did you get to speak with the Prime Minister? Did you talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu last night?
I speak to everybody.
Are you going to call the Prime Minister?
Both sides not to violate the ceasefire, but reports coming from the region suggest that the sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I don't think I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it, okay?
Have you spoken to him this morning? How confident are you that Iran's completely demolished?
I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. And you know, the fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing? They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated, and the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean.
You don't believe that Iran can rebuild its nuclear program?
Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers. You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace.
Israel says that Iran violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't what they're doing. Do you understand that?
Do you have a response to Iran?
That was the full one that we haven't played, but now we do. Oh, correction, fam. I said Amsterdam. No, it's Netherlands. Somebody corrected me, but I just verified and I checked Netherlands. That's where NATO is going to be held. So, welcome. In about 10 minutes, we're going to be listening to Jerome Powell speak before Congress. That's going to be pretty cool. And we'll see how the market reacts. Of course, XRP, Bitcoin, crypto, you know, everything, of course. So, let us know in the comments down below what you're thinking. Let us know in the comments down below, you know, right now, how's it going with your positions yesterday. It was a good day, you know, to buy. We're seeing right now some weakness in the price. That happens. I bought a 204 XRP, which I feel good about it. I mean, honestly, I am not planning hopefully to close because, I mean, right now, we're looking bullish. Take a look at Bitcoin right here. Look at that. Went to 106,000 BTC, which is really good, right? We have Chronos CRO, you know, went to 8.6, which is nice. XRP Stellar also doing well. Ethereum, 2,400, which is good. So far, it's been a good one, guys. It's been a good one. Amsterdam is in the Netherlands. Don't. I'm cooked. I need to go there. I need to go there. For sure, I need to go there. Conference is starting in about 8 minutes, brother. 8 minutes. Gotta love a live Oscar. What's up, Aldo? Good to have you, buddy. Welcome. Good to have you, buddy. Welcome. It's in Hague, not Amsterdam. Got it. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I mean, it's just what I hear from the news immediately, but it's all right. I got to go to those places. That's when you know you got to travel. What's up, BB? Good to have you, buddy. Welcome. We're going down when Powell speaks. Well, we'll see. You know, every time he opens his mouth, you know, things we don't want to hear happen, right? So imagine, bro. It's going to be cool. It's going to be good. But yeah, it's going to happen today, tomorrow. I think very good opportunities to be listening to this guy more because of the response Congress has for him, guys. The response Congress has for him, because we went to an FOMC meeting right this month. We heard the guy speak. We know what he said. We know he's really not ready to cut, but it's a semi-annual, right? So we really want Congress to grill on this guy and see, hey, man, go ahead and do us a favor. You think he's gonna cut or? Oh, no, he's not cutting right now. He's just giving a report, testimony, right? Here it is, basically. Inflation has eased significantly from the highs in the mid-22s, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2%. Respondents to our survey, consumers, businesses, and professionals forecast points to tariffs as a driving factor beyond the next year or so. However, most measures longer can expect. And there were some Watch Guru post. There was one, inflation, remains elevated. That's the only thing he says. Only thing he knows, right? What to say. Gonna be good to watch and enjoy. Jim Cramer says bullish. Why is that? Classic Trump. Classic Jim Cramer. Oh, there it is. Oh, look at this. The Senate Banking Committee, that is Tim Scott Lumens, unveil principles of digital asset market structure legislation. Cool. More info coming in. Like that. Trump's pressure campaign worked. Israel backed off. Ceasefire held. Of course, he called Netanyahu directly. Of course. So yeah, I mean, they have to stop. That's one of the main reasons that we don't see the price collapsing right now. I mean, because although there were some issues right there to get to a somewhat ceasefire, and we got Truth Social to see the latest here. This was, what in the world is this? 23 seconds ago. He just posted this. Stupid AOC Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the dumbest people in Congress, is not calling for my impeachment. Oh, here we go. Ready? Despite the fact that crooked and corrupt Democrats have already done that twice before, the reason for her rantings is all the victories that the U.S. has had under the Trump administration. The Democrats aren't used to winning, and she can't stand the concept of our country being successful again. When we examine her test scores, we'll find that she's not qualified for office, but nevertheless far more qualified than a Crockett, who is a seriously low IQ individual than Crockett, or Imar Omar, who does nothing but complain about our country. Yet the failed country that she comes from doesn't have government. It is drenched in crime and poverty, and is rated one of the worst in the world, even if it's even rated at all. How dare the mouse tell us how to run the United States of America. we're just coming back from a radical left experiment with Sleepy Joe, Kamala, and the out of penny charge. What a disaster it was. He's pissed. He's mad. He's unstoppable. Trump is not leaving anybody alive right now. AOC should be forced to take a cognitive test and that I just completed at the Walter Reed Medical Center as a part of my physical. As the doctor in charge said, President Trump aced it, meaning I got every answer right. Instead of her constant complaining, Alexandra should go back home to Queens, where I was also brought up, and straighten out her filthy, disgusting, crime-ridden streets in the district she represents and which she never goes to anymore. She better start worrying about her own primary before she thinks about beating our great Palestinian senator, crying Chuck Schumer, whose career is definitely on the very thin ice. She and her Democrat friends have just hit the lowest poll numbers in congressional history. So go ahead and try to impeaching me again. Make my day. Wow, dude. I'm telling you, that's what we're live today, man. Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump, bro. He is not playing today, bro. My goodness, bro. Wow. Wow. And this was 8 hours ago that he's going to be speaking today. Bro, I still can't get over this. I still can't get over this, bro. Wow. Fafo, right? Fafo. No. Welcome, everybody. You see how we're supposed to be talking about XRP, which we are in a way, but Donald J. Trump absorbs all the oxygen. Donald J. Trump absorbs all the oxygen. I just cannot stop it. I just cannot stop. I mean, the guy is everywhere, bro. Everywhere. Wow. It's about to start, fam. It's already 10 a.m. Eastern time. So at any time, this should actually start. And we're ready to listen to Jerome Powell, which Trump had something to say 8 hours ago. Too late, Jerome Powell of the Fed will be in Congress today in order to explain, among other things, why he is refusing to lower the rate. Europe has had 10 cuts. We have had 0. No inflation, great economy. We should be at least 2 to 3 points lower. Would save the U.S. $800 billion per year. Plus, what a difference this would make. If this later changed to negative, increase the rate. I hope the Congress really works this very dumb, hard-headed person over, who will be paying for his incompetence for many years to come. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm really ready to watch Republicans grill this guy. Maybe some Democrats too. Maybe some Democrats too. Baby, bro. So crazy day, bro. Don't you know? Pump it up. Drop a like, guys, and get everybody here. XRP fam. Let's go ahead and get ready to watch and enjoy because it's about to start. Oh, man, that's so crazy, bro. AOC, bro. AOC, bro. Can't believe it, bro.
Stand by to launch.
There it is. We're live. everybody, get ready to listen to the chairman and everybody in the committee. It's going to take a while, so just enjoy and let's see what happens with Powell today. Here we go.
The Committee on Financial Services will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. This hearing is entitled the Federal Reserve Semi-Annual Monetary Policy Report. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous material to the chair for inclusion in the record. I now recognize myself for 4 minutes for an opening statement. Good morning. I want to thank Chair Powell for joining us today. We appreciate your time and look forward to hearing more about the Federal Reserve's outlook on economic and monetary policy. There's been a lot of rhetoric lately, particularly from our friends across the aisle, suggesting that Republicans in the Congress are steering our economy toward a recession. However, the facts tell a different story. 4 months into the Trump administration, American workers and taxpayers are already benefiting from a strong, resilient economy. The Fed noted that growth is solid, and even former Fed officials have dismissed the idea of a recession this year or is near. Compare that to the previous administration. Under President Biden, Americans endured the highest inflation rates in decades, driven by reckless spending and misguided policy decisions. Now, under the Trump administration, inflation has declined to levels lower than those seen before President Biden's flawed so-called American Rescue Plan, and real wages are finally meaningfully growing again. There's always some economic uncertainty when the United States engages in difficult negotiations necessary to secure more open markets for American goods and services. But that uncertainty is not without a strategy of balanced, lower regulatory costs, pro-growth tax policy, and controls on federal spending, all combined with trade successes offer economic opportunity. One Fed official, Governor Waller, has outlined how a balanced approach combining potential tax rates with targeted tariffs could foster strong economic growth. Let me be clear on that point. We can fight to open markets, break down non-tariff barriers while achieving solid economic growth at the same time. That's President Trump's goal, just as it was for President Reagan in the 1980s. I also want to commend you, Mr. Chairman, the Federal Reserve, for taking positive steps to keep politics out of the Fed, including disbanding 4 internal climate-related committees and making the Fed leaner and more efficient by right-sizing your workforce across the system. These moves reflect a commitment to efficiency at the Federal Reserve. I'm also pleased that Governor Mickey Bowman has been confirmed as Vice Chair for Supervision at the board. Governor Bowman has been a tireless advocate for community banks, and this committee is eager to work with her on policies that enhance our banks' ability to provide greater access to capital and services for our families and businesses across our nation. I look forward to today's hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time. I'll now recognize Mr. Foster on behalf of the ranking member for 4 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, and I will save everyone a little bit of time. Ranking Member Waters was unavoidably detained. I'll just say a little bit that the markets have kind of spoken on their confidence in the Trump economy. Probably the single simplest metric of that is that the U.S. dollar is down roughly 10%. Okay, this is not a small thing, and it has caused countries around the world to question the primacy of the U.S. dollar going forward. This is one of the worst market responses, I think, to the chaos that we're seeing, the tariffs that are very destructive to international trade, and just everything that the markets are seeing and trying to suffer through. I know I'm contacted all the time by businesses in my district, manufacturing businesses that can't even start thinking about investing with the level of chaos just from the tariff policy alone. Anyway, there's a long set of things we should be talking about, and I'm happy to save some people some time, and let's get to it. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize the Chairman of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity, Mr. Lucas, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing will allow us to evaluate the state of the economy and review the FOMC's policy decisions. It's appropriate to regularly take a step back and assess the central bank's performance and its responsiveness to the economic conditions our constituents face back home. This hearing is particularly timely conversation as the Fed wraps up its 5-year framework review, including a thorough look at the consensus statement, communication strategy, and other guiding policies that will have a profound effect on the lives of every American. Many of these topics we'll discuss today we've taken a closer look at in the Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity Task Force. I look forward to building on these conversations here. One issue that I think warrants special attention is the binding nature of the SLR and ESLR on the Treasury market intermediation. I'm glad to see the Fed is looking into this tomorrow, and I hope we'll see meaningful action soon. Chairman Powell, thank you for being here. It's critically important that Congress and the central bank have an open dialogue. Transparency, accountability, honest communications are pillars of our system's success. I look forward to your testimony on the state of the economy and the Fed's plans for the future. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize the ranking member of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity, Mr. Vargas, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you, Chairman Powell, both for your years of public service and for being here today. Since 1977, the Fed has been tasked by Congress with its dual mandate goals of achieving both maximum employment and stable prices. Unfortunately, this administration has made accomplishing these goals more difficult. In the Fed's most recent summary of economic projections, we see a forecast for slower growth, stickier inflation, and rising unemployment, all of which point to a potential stagflation scenario. Whether it's the president's indecision on trade policy, his hiring freezes impacting the collection of economic data, his ballooning of the deficit to cut taxes for the wealthy, or his name-calling, all of these actions make it tougher for the Fed to do its job. I look forward to your testimony today, Mr. Powell, Chairman Powell, and I yield back with that.
Gentleman yields back.
Welcome,
Today,
Mr.
we do
Spader.
welcome the testimony of the Honorable Jerome Powell, Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Chairman Powell, we thank you for taking time to be with us. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your written testimony, and without objection, your written testimony will be made part of the record. You're now recognized for 5 minutes. Mike?
Oh,
Thank you, Chairman Hill, Ranking Member, and other members of the committee. It's great to be back here today. I appreciate the opportunity to present the Federal Reserve's semi-annual monetary policy report. The Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. The unemployment rate remains low, and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has come down a great deal, but has been running somewhat above our 2% longer run objective. We are attentive to the risks on both sides of our dual mandate. I will review the current economic situation before turning to monetary policy. Incoming data suggests that the economy remains solid. Following growth of 2.5% last year, GDP was reported to have edged down in the first quarter, reflecting swings in net exports that were driven by businesses bringing in imports ahead of potential tariffs. This unusual swing has complicated GDP measurement. Private domestic final purchases, or PDFP, which excludes net exports, inventory investment, and government spending, grew at a solid 2.5% rate. Within PDFP, growth of consumer spending moderated, while investment in equipment and intangibles rebounded from weakness in the fourth quarter. Surveys of households and businesses, however, report a decline in sentiment in recent months and elevated uncertainty about the economic outlook, largely reflecting trade policy concerns. It remains to be seen how these developments might affect future spending and investment. In the labor market, conditions have remained solid. Payroll job gains averaged a moderate 224,000 per month in the first 5 months of the year. The unemployment rate at 4.2% in May remains low and has stayed in a narrow range for the past year. Wage growth has continued to moderate while still outpacing inflation. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that the conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance and consistent with maximum employment. The labor market is not a source of significant inflationary pressures. The strong labor market conditions in recent years have helped narrow longstanding disparities in employment and earnings across demographic groups. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total personal consumption expenditures, or PCE prices, rose 2.3% over the 12 months ending in May, and that, excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.6%. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have moved up over recent months, as reflected in both market and survey-based measures. Respondents to surveys of consumers, businesses, and professional forecasters point to tariffs as the driving factor. Beyond the next year or so, however, most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. With the labor market at or near maximum employment and inflation remaining somewhat elevated, the Federal Open Market Committee has maintained the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5% since the beginning of the year. We've also continued to reduce our holdings of Treasury and agency mortgage-backed securities, and beginning in April, further slowed the pace of this decline to facilitate a smooth transition to ample reserve balances. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Policy changes continue to evolve, and their effects on the economy remain uncertain. The effects of tariffs will depend, among other things, on their ultimate level. Expectations of that level, and thus of the related economic effects, reached a peak in April and have since declined. Even so, increases in tariffs this year are likely to push up prices and weigh on economic activity. The effects on inflation could be short-lived, reflecting a one-time shift in the price level. It's also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent. Avoiding that would depend on the size of the tariff effects, on how long it takes for them to pass through fully into prices, and ultimately on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored and to prevent a one-time increase in the price level from becoming an ongoing inflation problem. As we act to meet that obligation, we will balance our maximum employment and price stability mandates, keeping in mind that without price stability, we cannot achieve the long periods of strong labor market conditions that benefit all Americans. For the time being, we are well positioned to wait to learn more about the likely course of the economy before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now turn to member questions. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Over the past few weeks, our Democratic colleagues have suggested the following. After the initial release of the GDP report, the president is driving the economy into a recession. Chairman Powell, the latest FOMC statement described economic activity had to continue to expand at a solid pace, and you just reiterated that in your testimony this morning. In your view, is the term recession and the economy growing at a solid pace, are those synonymous with each other?
I would say no.
And you note that the labor market continues strong, the economy's at a standard pace, and you also referenced in your testimony that first quarter GDP initial react was also from front-end loading, as you noted, imports to try to avoid tariff impacts. Also, I looked at the Atlanta Fed GDP Now model, which forecasts GDP growth for the second quarter of this year at nearly 4%, with core GDP forecast at 2%. Does that Atlanta model suggest a recession to you?
No, I would say it doesn't.
So in looking at your remarks about tariffs today and then the ones that you made during March and April, I was looking back at a Fed study that noted that up until March, tariffs have already been partially passed through in consumer prices, leading to a contribution of merely 1/10 percentage point increase in core PCE prices. And a Harvard study last week showed that prices have only modestly adjusted since the announcement of tariffs. Finally, the longer-term inflation expectations remain consistent with the 2% goal. Governor Waller laid out a pathway that allows for rate cuts provided that average effective tariff rates remain close to 10%, or I assume he means 10% or lower. The labor market remains solid. Prices continue to disinflate. So given that data I've outlined, I'm sure data that you're very familiar with, for the economy to avoid persistent inflation, do you concur with Governor Waller that there is a pathway for good news as it relates to the regulatory policies, the tax policies that I've discussed in a world with lower tariff rates?
So first, I wouldn't comment on any other FOMC members' comments one way or the other, but I will say this. I think many paths are possible here, and certainly the one you mentioned is a possible one. We could see inflation come in not as strong as we expect, and if that were the case, that would tend to suggest cutting sooner. We could see the labor market weakening, and that would also suggest cutting sooner. On the other hand, if we see inflation coming in higher, or if the labor market were to remain strong, then we would probably be moving later. So I think a range of possible paths are possible, and certainly the one you mentioned is one of them.
In February of 2021, you told us in this committee that you would stay in your lane and not comment on President Biden's proposal for the American Rescue Plan or sharply increasing federal spending. And you said it was an issue, but that you would stay in your lane and not comment on it. But here in this year, you have commented on this idea of tariffs being set by the executive branch. So are tariffs in your lane, but a huge fiscal spending by the Biden administration not in your lane? Explain to the committee why you chose to be silent in February of 21, but outspoken this spring.
Sure. So we haven't commented, and it would be inappropriate for us to comment on the policy of tariffs. We don't have a view. It's not our job, and we just wouldn't do that. And just as we wouldn't comment on the reconciliation package that you're working on right now. We're not commenting on tariffs. What our job is inflation, keeping inflation under control, and also keeping maximum employment. And when policies have what appear to be short and medium-term implications, meaningful implications for that, then they kind of, not the policies themselves, but the inflation becomes our job.
Yeah. You know my views on price stability. I think it's a first among equals in your dual mandate. I've argued for that. I've introduced legislation to make the dual mandate the sole mandate, and we've talked about that before. But I was very curious about your thoughts on former president of the Cleveland Bank, Loretta Mester's quote that I read from last fall. She says, "I think that maximum employment is the maximum level of employment consistent with price stability." In other words, she elegantly ties that together, that price stability is what you can have more control over rather than all these other factors that enter the employment picture like legislative and executive branch. What's your thought about her quote?
I personally think that's a very reasonable way to think about it.
Thank you very much. I yield back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Chair Powell, and thank you for being here. Last week, the FOMC decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5%. While I was not surprised by the decision to hold rates steady, I was surprised by the committee's revised forecast since March, which represented a decrease of 0.3 percentage points for GDP, a similar increase for core PCE, and an uptick in the unemployment rate to 4.5%. Can you explain the incoming data that the committee has seen since March that caused it to make these adjustments?
Sure. So first of all, these are individual. This is not a committee forecast. These are just individuals submitting their own personal forecasts, and we don't bless those as a committee. But I think people are looking at the incoming data and having a range of different judgments. If you look at the range, if you look at the central tendency, you'll see that it covers quite a wide range. Those are the medians that you're talking about. I think so. Inflation is projected to have moved up because of what we've seen, particularly from tariffs. And I think if you look at other outside forecasters, you'll see very much the same thing.
And what data are you looking for?
Well, we look at the incoming data on we look at our own forecast and we ask ourselves what's likely to happen. You know, monetary policy has to be forward-looking. A forecast is a prediction of what's going to happen in the future.
Thank you. In its statement, the committee announced that it will continue to monitor the implications of incoming data and adjust the stand of monetary policy as appropriate. Some analysts predict 2 rate cuts by the end of the year are still on the table. Is this a fair and accurate assumption? And what incoming data will the committee need to see to consider these cuts?
So what will actually happen with rates is going to depend on the path of the economy, and that's highly uncertain. So I would just say what that means at this moment in time is that a significant majority of the committee, but also there's a pretty significant minority that doesn't agree, but a significant majority feels it will be appropriate to reduce rates later this year. And what that means is that each of those persons who wrote down a cut in rates later this year, they think that there's some state of the world where inflation doesn't prove to be as high, or the labor market weakens, or some combination of those two things, that it will turn out to be more likely than not appropriate to reduce policy rates, subject to great uncertainty. I mean, we will, you know, the story has been evolving, and our thinking has been adapting, and that will continue.
Thank you. Chair Powell, although a ceasefire has been tentatively reached in the Middle East, the situation still has the potential to open global and energy markets, especially if the ceasefire is broken, while at this point Iran is seen as unlikely to close the Strait of Hormuz. That decision could change. How is the Fed assessing the current situation and incorporating those assessments as it considers future adjustment to economic projections and its stand on monetary policy?
So I think it's too early to know what any economic implications might be, and I would not want to speculate. Like everyone else, we are, of course, watching the situation.
Thank you. And Chair Powell, after reviewing the economic data following the meeting last week, it seems to me that the committee is indicating that we could be headed for a situation where inflation accelerates while unemployment rises and growth becomes more sluggish. In this scenario, this will put the Fed's dual mandate of maximum employment and price stability in tension with one another. In this scenario, how does the Fed balance these priorities in order to achieve both mandates?
So let me say that we're not facing that right now, and that isn't really our forecast that we will face such an issue in a serious way. But if that does happen, then what we do is we look at the 2 goals and we see which one of them is farther from its goal. 2 variables, you know, is maximum employment or price stability farther from its goal, and we prefer the one that's farther than its goal. And then we also ask ourselves, how quickly will they return to goal? It's a very difficult situation for any central bank, and, you know, I would say again, we're not in that situation right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The Vice Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Heising of Michigan, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Hill and Chair Powell. Good to see you again. I got a lot to cover, so we're going to try and keep this concise. But following up a bit on what Chair Hill had been talking about, you had said in January 29, 2025, quote, "We don't know what will happen with tariffs, with immigration, with fiscal policy, and with regulatory policy." I would add energy into that, by the way. "We need to let those policies be articulated before we can even begin to make a plausible assessment of what their implications for the economy will be. This is no different than any set of policy changes at the beginning of the administration." However, December 18 of 2024 at the FOMC press conference, you noted, and I'm paraphrasing, that some Federal Reserve officials began to incorporate preliminary conditional estimates of how fiscal policies might impact the economy into their forecasts. This seems inconsistent, and I sidebarred with the chair to say, okay, did I hear this correctly, his question and sort of your answer? What I heard is that there was a belief that the IRA would not be inflationary, but that tariffs could be. Therefore, suddenly you and others were commenting on tariffs. And for the institution, I know you try to be consensus driven. Why are there FOMC participants making fiscal policy assumptions into their forecasting when you yourself said that fiscal policies need to be articulated before the FOMC can make a plausible assessment into their implications, what those will be? And I think if there's different participants having different assumptions, that would render the SEP, Summary of Economic Projections, biased, meaningless, useless, less impactful, and when you're not comparing apples to apples. So wouldn't it make more sense for all the forecasters to make the same fiscal policy assumptions at the same time? Or if not, shouldn't each participant disclose what assumptions that they're using and building into that? So here's the question.
So that's a great question. That really, when the Summary of Economic Projections was originally designed and put into effect in this way, the way it works is that individuals are free to make whatever assumptions they want, and they do disclose them. They disclose them in their speeches and things like that. So there will be situations where some people incorporate something and others don't, and we try to be transparent about that. But that's kind of the way it works. When I say we don't take it into account, I'm really talking about policy and the committee as a whole, where we won't take things into account until we know.
And you believe that the participants disclose their assumptions when they're doing their forecasts?
Well, I think they do that in their speeches. Each people go out. You may have noticed there are a lot of speeches.
Well, I guess the opaqueness of the Fed has been something over the arc of my 15 years on this committee has been one that has been debated greatly, including auditing the Fed and a number of other things that have gone on. I've got here a brief moment. I do feel like I need to touch on interest rates. Not to be a shock, you asked how the family business was doing back in Michigan. Families involved in sand and gravel and aggregates and construction and things like that. It's been strong. We need more labor. We need a few other things on that, what's happening. But I think there's no recession. That's been established. There's no hyperinflation, or certainly not as what some had been projecting. Yet there seems to be higher than expected, or certainly desired interest rates for many of us. And I'm curious how high interest rates, they hurt Americans who are paying car loans, credit cards, mortgages. You had FHFA Director Pulte asking for lower interest rates, which would obviously impact home buyers as well. So what is it that's keeping, in your mind, the Fed from what many of us believe is the right thing to do, which is to lower some interest rates, and by the way, match what the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Swiss Central Bank, a number of emerging central banks. By the way, that's your own assessment on page 33 as where you're laying that out.
Thanks,
Why aren't
Charles.
we doing what the rest of the world is doing? Is it because we're at full employment? Is it because of those tariffs concerns that you said weren't part of the analysis? Was it energy, groceries, durable goods? Why?
So you're right that if you just look in the rearview mirror and look at the existing data that we've seen, you can make a good argument that would call for us to be at a neutral level, which would be, a couple of cuts or maybe more kind of thing. The reason we're not is the forecast by all professional forecasters that I know of on the outside and the Fed do expect a meaningful increase in inflation over the course of this year. When I said we weren't going to talk about tariffs and inflation, that was to say until we see what the policies are. And so now we know a lot more. It's 6 months since I said that. So anyway, I'd be happy to continue this with you.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, last month there was research published in the Journal of Urban Health that found that more than half of Black women of reproductive age, that's the term they use, in the counties that I represent, that had experienced some sort of eviction during their lifetime. So that's like 50% of Black women in the two largest counties, Wayne County and Oakland County in Michigan. And these numbers are horrific. As you know, were you aware of that?
No, I was not.
And evictions are often very traumatic experience, but also it creates a cycle of poverty, but also this instability for many families. But especially when it comes to a lot of our Black neighbors, the access to equity, the access to housing has diminished even more. In Michigan, we lost more Black home ownership than any other state in the country during the last recession. So we know the housing crisis, I believe, is structural, and some may say it's a policy choice. While there are many factors at play, and you know this, Chairman, high mortgage rates, the finance rates and so forth, that drag the supply of new housing. But last month, new housing hit a 5-year low. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure exactly what statistic you are referring to.
Okay, I don't know. There was all this articles about
You don't
the
know?
housing market and the impact of tariffs and so forth, and they said, again, it hit a 5-year low. And again, I'm getting this from a source. But this sets the market up for higher inflation and more burdensome housing costs to years to come. So Chairman Powell, you know, I'm looking at this monetary whatever policy framework that you guys have put together. Do you think that the way it's structured, and again, I'm trying to understand how you're looking at this in the housing crisis, do you believe it's eroding new rental supply under construction right now, leading to high inflation in future years?
So I think there are two things going on quickly. One is just there's a longer run shortage of housing in the United States, which there's nothing that the Fed can do about. That's not something we can affect.
Well,
there's also, if I may say, in the short run, rates are high, and that's going to weigh on housing activity. But the best thing we can do for the housing market, the absolute best thing, is to restore price stability so that rates come down and so that rates can be at a level that people can afford.
But don't you think that the restrictive monetary policy the framework you all put together undermines long-term price stability right now by reducing the supply?
No, I mean, I think
But
it
you're reducing
restores
supply.
price stability. The point of higher rates is to,
So you don't think the higher rates is impacting future supply of housing?
So I think what that does is, I think interest-sensitive sectors like housing are very much directly affected when we cut rates or when we raise rates. That's right. But that's part of the mechanism for restoring general price stability.
So keeping the high interest rates does not impact future supply of housing?
It does not, you know, over the long...
I need to go back to talk to
over the long
women
run,
that the
Fed
study...
will not be, our policy will not be a driver of longer run housing supply in the United
So,
States.
okay, let me ask you, what is the difference? And I'm honestly confused. I want to learn here, and I'm sure people listening to this want to learn. What is the difference between demand-driven rent inflation and supply-driven rent inflation? Like, you guys use these terminologies. What is that? How do I communicate that to the public? What is the difference between supply-driven versus demand-driven rent?
You know, those are not terms that we use particularly often.
What's
but
supply-driven formula?
that would mean that, you know, that there's not enough supply to meet demand. But at the same time, it also means there's more demand than there is supply.
So are you guys ignoring that?
No, but as I said again, our policies will not affect in the long run. In the long run,
No, I'm being
either
serious,
demand
'cause I
or
see somebody
supply
behind you
in
kind of
housing.
shaking. I'm being serious, y'all. We're talking about a housing crisis that is getting worse right now because we're not paying attention to future instability that the current rates, and you can raise your eyebrows and all this stuff behind. I don't know. I mean, do you understand? Like, I come from a community right now that I believe is now being impacted by the current framework that you're putting together, that I do feel like it's going to be long-term effects on the housing crisis, and you're ignoring it.
No, we're not, actually. We think the very best thing we can do is to fully restore price stability at the aggregate level. That will be the best thing for homeowners and for home
Even though the
builders and
housing
everybody
supply
else.
has been
That's in
impacted
the
by the
long
high
run, that
interest.
is the single
But
thing
Chairman
that
Powell,
Congress
you
has
see where I'm
assigned us
coming
to
from.
do.
But you see where I'm coming from. It is impacting future supply of housing, right?
Not in the long run, no.
Okay. Well,
Gentlewoman's
Mr.
time
Chair,
has
thank you.
expired. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, who's also the chair of our Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Artificial Intelligence. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hill. Thank you, Chairman Powell, for being with us today. I want to dive into two actions the Fed's recently taken to get a little additional color on. Yesterday, the Fed announced that reputational risk would no longer be a component in bank exams. I viewed that positively. I viewed the reputational risk as often being a catch-all for political bias. I think it's positive to depoliticize bank exams and instead focus on the core and measurable risks. Could you provide color as to whether or not any new information came to light that led to the decision of the Fed to remove that yesterday?
I'm not aware of any new information. No, we just think it's the right thing to do, and of course made an announcement on Monday under Governor Bowman's, Vice Chair Bowman's leadership.
Why would it not have been done previously if it's the right thing to do? I agree with you, it's the right thing to do. Why was it? Any timeline as to why that was done yesterday versus previously?
No, I think this is a problem that we came to understand as a problem over the course of the last couple of years, and began considering what's going on here. We're hearing a lot of reports of debanking and that sort of thing, and over the course of really 2024 came to the view that this was a serious problem that we need to address, and we've said that publicly, and now we're doing this, and so are the other agencies, by the way.
I appreciate you taking that action. I do agree that there were real political bias in some of those exams, in particular as it related to regulated entities engaged in the digital asset space. Let me shift into the digital asset space if I can.
Let's go!
Another action recently taken by the Fed, the Novel Activities Supervision Program was ended and withdrew several statements on digital asset related risks that deterred bank involvement in particular. You in the Fed and others at the Fed have spoken positively about the House and Senate work to regulate stablecoin in particular, a real opportunity to dollarize the globe and be a significant purchaser of U.S. Treasuries. Following that action by the Fed, have you seen an identifiable shift in banks or other regulated entities as it relates to engagement in the digital asset space?
You know, I wouldn't be the one to be picking that up first, but what I do see is a very significant change in the tone, and it really does reflect evolving thinking and the evolving status of the crypto industry, and I would expect over time we'll see more activity.
How is the Fed evaluating and overseeing banks or other regulated entities that are in the digital assets or crypto space?
So our view is that banks get to decide who their customers are. That's not our decision. And so banks are free to provide banking services to the crypto industry, to crypto companies, and banks are also free to conduct crypto activities as long as they do so in a way that is protective of safety and soundness.
Good.
Thank you very much. Let me shift gears because I want to give you just a little bit of an opportunity to comment on the housing sector once again, but give you a little freedom here to speak to that area. You correctly are trying to balance inflation and price stability. But also higher rates have a significant impact on the housing market, as shelter and housing costs are a significant driver of why many families can't afford the things that they need. Could you provide color as to how you're analyzing the impact that housing and shelter costs have on families and on inflation with your desire to maintain price stability at the interest rates that is currently set by the Fed?
Sure. So, we realize that people are feeling high housing costs and high financing costs. In terms of inflation, we look at something called owner's equivalent rent and rentals, and that's meant to capture both rented housing and owned housing. And it's been very sticky. It's been one of the stickiest parts of inflation. I'm happy to say now it actually is coming down quite regularly. That's very good news. That's been the part, really it's been the service inflation that's been stickier than other parts of inflation. So that's good news for people, I think, and it is showing through into measured inflation now. Again, in the long run, the best thing we can do is restore price stability and let the market work. Even then, though, we're still going to have a housing shortage.
What data do you think is leading to the reduction in the rent equivalent?
I just think it took time. So the thought is when you would think that if rents come up every year, you would think it would take 1 year or 2 years for a lack of growth in rents to show up in a lack of growth in housing prices. It turns out it takes 4 years or 3 years. If you're an existing tenant, it's a complicated thought, but if you're an existing tenant, you don't actually catch up the way you would if new tenants came in. And so that's made the measurement of inflation stickier. But I'm happy to say we've been through that period now, and we are really seeing now housing services inflation pretty close to where it was when inflation was solidly at 2%.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California, Mr. Liccardo, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Let's go.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your testimony today. I appreciate that your dual mandate is full employment and price stability, and I appreciate your efforts on behalf of our country to achieve those. My understanding is that critical data is collected by the Bureau of Labor Statistics to help formulate the indicators that you rely on, that we rely on to understand unemployment rates, CPI, and other inflation indicators. We are certainly hearing a lot about the impacts of DOGE on our workforce, and specifically about the elimination of many of those positions in BLS. And now we have a proposal in front of Congress to cut $56 million from that agency. Are you concerned about the ability of your team to get accurate data and about the ability to have reliable indicators to make good decisions upon?
I wouldn't say that I'm concerned about the data today, although clearly there has been a very mild degradation of the scope of the surveys and things like that. But I would say the direction of travel is something I'm concerned about, and that is measuring the U.S. economy carefully and well is a project that's been going on, and we're getting better at it for 100 years and more. And it's really important, not just for the Fed, but for Congress and for businesses, frankly, to know what really is going on in the economy. What's happening? Is growth high? Is it low? And all those sorts of things. So I think it's a smart investment to just continually try to get better at measurement of what's happening in the economy. And I don't like to see that, the kind of stories I'm reading and the idea being that the data is going to become more volatile and less reliable. That's not going to, that'll make it more difficult for the private sector and for you and for us. And I don't like to see that direction.
I agree. Thank you. I appreciate that it's not your role to comment on the advisability of specific policies, but given your critical role in ensuring price stability and reducing inflation, I have had conversations with, quite recently, just a week ago, with a C-suite executive of a major global retailer who informed me, because I asked, why aren't we seeing the impact of these tariffs and price data yet? And he said, it's coming in the third quarter, because it takes time for tariffs to work their way through a distribution chain. Often what you have on the shelf today may have been imported 2 or 3 months ago. Is that your understanding? Do you anticipate there may be impacts down the road?
Yeah, that's very much what I hear. I happened to meet with an unusually large number of business people in this last FOMC cycle, and that's a typical thing that they'll say, especially the retailers, that what's being sold now was in inventory in February, let's say, and it just isn't showing up yet. So we do expect to show up, tariff inflation to show up more, but I want to be honest, we really don't know how much of that's going to be passed through to the consumers. We just don't know, and we won't know until we see it. It could be lower than we expect. It could be higher. We have to wait and see, which is kind of what we're doing.
I appreciate the uncertainty. Another thing he told me that had me very concerned was that often they will increase prices on goods not subjected to tariffs to compensate for the very substantial losses they have to suffer with the increase of tariffs on relatively price elastic goods. So in other words, necessities will also tend to bear a higher price, even if they're not subjected to tariffs. Is that your understanding of the potential impacts?
That very much is something that companies will tell you that they do. If they can't cover the losses on the thing that's being tariffed, they'll find other ways to do it. We actually don't have prominent examples of that yet, but that's certainly a possibility. And that did happen in the last tariff episode with washing machines and dryers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And finally, there's indications in the introduction of the report that the Fed is losing its ability, as we see interest rates getting closer and closer to the minimum threshold, the ability to stimulate this economy in times of recession. We haven't had a recession, or at least we haven't had an extended recession in a decade and a half. I am particularly concerned now as we are looking at debt that is being considered to be imposed on future generations by this particular bill. Could there be a combination of very high debt and very little room to move in monetary policy that could undermine our ability to respond to the next recession?
So we faced that issue quite a bit in the era of very low interest rates, but we're at higher levels of interest rates now, so there's significantly more room to cut than there was then.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Powell, thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. I want to go back to something we had some brief discussions about this in the past, but in September of 2024, with core inflation still being above target and the labor market was holding steady at the time, the Fed made a decision to cut rates by a full 0.5 percentage point. It kind of raised some serious questions as to whether or not the data truly supported such a move at that time, and I think some of us were surprised that it was a full 0.5%. So can you revisit that again, what the Fed was thinking at that time? Because it seems to be somewhat of an enigma now. It stands out as, why was this done? Why was the 0.5% done at that point?
I'd be glad to. So first of all, actually the inflation and employment readings were very similar then to what they are now. They weren't terribly different, a tenth or two.
Right.
But the difference then was, you mentioned that the labor market was stable. It wasn't. The unemployment rate had actually gone up almost a full percentage point. I was very clear about this. We were very clear about it in real time too. The concern at that time was that there really hasn't been an experience, or hadn't been an experience in the modern era, in which the unemployment rate has gone up close to 1%, that hasn't been followed by much higher levels of unemployment and a recession. So we were looking at that and saying, and remember, at that point, at the point we're talking about, the federal funds rate was 5.3%, so definitely a very restrictive level. We were the last of the big central banks to cut. So we wanted to make a statement that we were supportive of the labor market and not just inflation. We've been focusing on inflation. I was quite clear about this. So it was all about the labor market. Inflation was the same, and unemployment was roughly the same, but it was the rate of change with the unemployment rate that raised a lot of concerns. And remember, we were being criticized for being late to cut. So we could have done 25. If we'd done 25 in July, we were criticized for not cutting in July. Instead, we cut 50 in September, and it seemed like the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, we do what we think is the right thing when we think it's the right thing to do. We don't take into consideration political factors. If we start doing that, I don't know where that stops. Once you start considering elections and stuff like that, where does it stop? So
and I didn't want to insinuate that it had anything to do with the election itself, but there just seems to be some very similar numbers right now. And I'm wondering, and I don't bring this up because I want to kind of make a point about did the Fed do the right thing or not. I bring it up because it seems like everything's in place right now to kind of do the same thing, make the same move. I know this morning already you've talked a little bit about where you were on inflation right now and kind of what you're watching, but is there any lesson there? I mean, are we in a position where it would be appropriate to do something as big as a 0.5% cut again?
Well, look, as I said earlier, if you just look at the basic data and don't look at the forecast, you would say that we would have continued cutting. The difference, of course, is at this time, all forecasters are expecting pretty soon that some significant inflation will show up from tariffs. Now, and we can't just ignore that, but we're just saying let's wait and see more. That's all we're doing. And if you will have noticed, a substantial majority of the committee has written down rate cuts in the remaining 4 years, four meetings this year. So it's just a question of being prudent and careful. But at a time when the labor market is still strong, we don't see weakness in the labor market. If we did, that would change things. We're going to continue to adapt as the data adapt. But that is the difference between then and now. Then, inflation was forecasted to continue to come down. Here, it's forecasted to go up by all forecasters. So, and again, we're not overreacting to that. We're just saying, hey, as long as the economy's strong, we can take a little bit of a pause here. And that's what we're doing. And again, continue to adapt as the data comes in. If we see data that suggests that inflation's not going to produce big increases, that would matter. And if we saw the labor market weakening, that would matter too. But we don't see those things.
What about supply chain? In 2020, that was a big issue, obviously related to COVID. But I know myself and other members, when we're in our districts and we're specifically talking to light manufacturing, there's concerns about the supply chain. Is that part of the data package that you review when you make a decision about where we're headed in the future?
Very much so. I think that's one of the great, well, won't call it a great thing, but one of the
Gentleman's time
lessons
has
to be taken from the last episode is supply chains really matter. We're watching that carefully. It's too soon to say really on that. We're not seeing it yet, but we could.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Gottheimer, you recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, I'm deeply concerned about the threat of Iranian cyber attacks on our financial system as retaliation for our strikes on their nuclear facilities. In its cybersecurity report last year, the Fed acknowledged that critical infrastructure, including financial services, is at risk with rising geopolitical tensions. Iran has a history of targeting American infrastructure companies and financial institutions and banks, which could obviously threaten and cause economic damage. What actions is the Fed taking now to monitor and defend against Iranian or proxy cyber threats targeting our country's financial institutions?
So we're in touch with the other regulators and the parts of the government that work on cyber, as you know, and we're in touch with the banks to say, for people to be on the alert for things like that to happen, and also we're on the alert because we're a target as well. So you're right to raise it. It's a big issue, and
Do you feel like you have the resources right now to be prepared for that?
Yes, I mean I think we do. We spend a lot, and the government generally spends a lot on these things, and but you can never ever be comfortable in this area because the bad guys are always getting better. So we need to get better.
Thank you, Chairman. Switching gears, the president and members of his administration have recently called you out, various name calling.
Here we go.
For certain decisions you've made. I know some people worry that the president's bullying will impact your decision making. I know you work together, and I know that and respect, obviously, your independence greatly. Anything you want to add and give you a chance to reiterate your independence to the American people?
Yeah, I would just say we're focused on one thing, and that is we want to deliver a good economy for the benefit of the American people. That's it. And anything else is kind of a distraction. I don't mean to refer to any particular thing, but we stay focused on that task all the time. We always do what we think is the right thing to do. And, we live with the consequences. And I don't know how else to do the job.
Right, so the name calling and the Mr. Too Late and all that stuff, the American people shouldn't worry about that. You're focused on being independent.
That's what I care about. I care about doing the job for the American people. The things we do matter a lot for people's lives, and that really concentrates the mind. You want to just stay focused on that task. As long as you're sitting in these chairs that we occupy, focus on that task, do what you think is the right thing, and take the consequences.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've previously stated that you view stablecoins as a form of money. Payment stablecoins are already being used for both retail and wholesale payments, as well as for settlement. Recently, this committee passed the Stablecoin Act and the Senate passed the Genius Act, both aiming to establish clear regulatory frameworks for fully reserved dollar-backed payment stablecoins. Given their design to maintain a stable value and be redeemable for U.S. dollars, should the SEC or other regulators explore treating these stablecoins as cash equivalents for accounting or financial reporting purposes?
So let me say, I think it's a great thing that bills are moving. We need a stablecoin framework on that particular issue. I don't have a view for you. I can come back to you on that.
I'd be grateful. Thank you. High rates have also caused, as we've discussed, the cost of paying off our nation's debt to skyrocket. The CBO estimates that interest payments will cost the U.S. $1 trillion in fiscal year 2026 and continue to rise to almost $1.8 trillion by FY 2035. How do you see us continuing to be able to afford to pay off our debt at this rate? And as the U.S. continues to borrow, how does that impact your decision to keep or cut rates? Obviously, foreign countries like Japan, who are significant buyers of our bonds, have started decreasing their purchases significantly. Other internal pressures worldwide are having that impact. Are you worried about this global issue?
Fiscal policy and it really is not our job, and it's not something we take into consideration in making monetary policy. That's really elected people's jobs, and I would add that for some time now, the U.S. federal fiscal policy has been on an unsustainable path, and I'll limit myself to that.
Last question. Last week, you chose to keep rates steady, and families in our state, as you'll hear from a lot of people today, are really struggling with the higher cost of borrowing and putting off bigger purchases on things like cars and homes. As a result, their wallets being crushed by these price hikes and obviously the president's tariffs. What do you have to say to Jersey families who are struggling with higher costs, and how you look at how they should forecast themselves for their own families?
We're committed to returning inflation sustainably.
Cut the
to 2%
rates,
and keeping it
man.
there in the long run. And what we're doing now is we had cut rates by 100 basis points, so they've come down quite a bit. And when the time is right, I expect that will continue, and that will depend on economic factors, in the coming months for starters.
Thank you. I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Nebraska, the chair of our Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, Mr. Flood, you're recognized 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, later this week, the banking agencies will be proposing changes to the supplementary leverage ratio, which we think are long overdue, considering the Fed in 2021 indicated that they would soon put out proposals for reform to the SLR and never actually did. However, our understanding is that the proposal being considered this week will not allow for treasuries to be excluded from the SLR calculation. Secretary Bessent earlier this year had argued that such a change could serve as a boost for banks and their ability to intermediate in the treasury market and could potentially pull treasury yields down 30 to 70 basis points. Chairman Powell, do you agree with the Treasury Secretary's comments on the potential positive impact of SLR reform on the Treasury market, and what is the rationale for not excluding Treasuries from the SLR calculation in the proposed rule?
So I agree that when the leverage ratio is binding, it discourages banks from undertaking low-margin, fairly safe activities such as mediation in the Treasury markets. So this should encourage more mediation. I don't have a numerical estimate of how much that would matter, but I do think it would matter. I think it was important. I've supported leverage ratio reform for a very long time, since before 2021.
Chairman,
in terms of the structure of the thing, I think we're seeking comment on a particular proposal that doesn't involve exclusion, but we're also asking a question about exclusion.
Mr. Chairman, considering the Fed temporarily excluded treasuries from the SLR calculation during the COVID pandemic, were you aware of any safety and soundness or financial stability problems that arose as a result of that decision? And if not, why was that relief terminated in 2021?
So that was an emergency measure. From the beginning and end, it was an emergency measure. I think, my long-held view is that we should have a permanent measure, and now we're going to. And we have an open board meeting on Wednesday afternoon, and after I finish my hearing on the Senate side, and I'm very much looking forward to putting this proposal out for comment.
Thank you. In March, the Federal Reserve, together with the FDIC and the OCC, announced that they intend to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking to repeal the 2023 Community Reinvestment Act and replace it with the legacy CRA framework. Nearly 3 months have passed since this announcement. What is the status of this project?
Well, we're going to do what we said we were going to do. It's just a question of execution, and I think you'll see that coming. This would be so Vice Chair Bowman has the job of sequencing these things, and that one's certainly coming.
Do you intend to issue a proposal that will be a clean rescission and replacement of that rulemaking, or are you considering amendments to the legacy rule?
I honestly don't know. We'll come back to you on that.
Okay, so we should know more later this week?
We might, yeah.
Okay. Finally, I'd like to build off of what Congressman Stile asked previously on the Supervision of Novel Activities program. Do you feel any changes could be made to it to encourage innovation, and do you anticipate any such changes to the program?
I do, and I also think Governor Bowman, now Vice Chair Bowman, is someone who is actually deeply knowledgeable and experienced in supervision, and that hasn't really been the model. We've more had people who are experts on regulation. I think she brings a particular ability to move supervision in a healthy direction while also preserving safety and soundness. And that's what you mentioned is one of the dimensions in which I think that will be true.
Thank you for your testimony today. I appreciate your service to the country. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the ranking member of our full committee, Mrs. Waters, for 5 minutes.
Oh, boy. Get ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, I appreciate that despite the repeated attacks by the president and his cabinet on you personally, that you stood your ground and you did not bow to pressure from Trump, especially given the current state of economic uncertainty due to his policies. Last week, the Fed held interest rates steady Afterwards, you said that you and other experts continue to expect a meaningful amount of inflation due to Trump's tariffs. You said that it may take some time for the tariffs to work their way through the supply chain, but that you found, and I quote, many companies do expect to put some or all of the effect of tariffs through to the next person in the chain and ultimately to the consumer, quote, end quote. So while the president may try to claim other countries pay these tariffs, can you confirm that it is indeed consumers and businesses in the United States that will bear these costs?
So it can be anybody from the exporter, the importer, the retailer, the manufacturer, or the consumer that winds up paying these tariffs. In the beginning, it will be the importer that pays the tariff, but ultimately it will be spread out among those five, each of which will try very hard not to contribute, but in the end, the tariff will be paid. And you know, all of the data suggests that at least some of that will fall, not all of it, but at least some of it will fall on consumers.
Well, you indicated it may take some time for tariffs to work their way through the supply chain. Would you elaborate on this, including when is it that we can see negative impacts to inflation from Trump's tariff policy?
So, you know, the things that are being sold at retail now, they might have been put into inventory before the tariffs in February or March. So we think we should start to see this over the summer, you know, in the June numbers and in the July numbers. And if we don't, I think we're learning here. If we see less pass-through, there aren't historical experiences we can consult here, really. So it may turn out that the pass-through is less or more than we think. And I think we're going to be learning, you know, we'll get a number for June, you know, an inflation number for June. We'll learn something then. We'll get it for July. As we go through the summer, we should start seeing this. And if we don't, I think we're perfectly open to the idea that the pass-through will be less than we think. And if so, that'll matter for our policy.
Well, you know, I've been talking with a lot of my constituents about these tariffs. And the question that comes up is, now, is this going to only hurt maybe the big businesses? What about our small business people? What about the people that we buy goods and services from every day in our communities? Is this going to hurt big business as well as small business?
Yes, I mean, I don't think it's, I think it will certainly, if you're a smaller company that maybe imports a single product, that's a common business model these days, then you may if your product is tariffed, you may be the one that's affected significantly, whereas bigger companies have more resources and a more diverse product line.
Why do you think you can resist the president basically telling you what to do? What gives you that authority?
I don't think about it that way at all. I think I have a job that I'm sworn to do, and all I think of is how much people rely on us to get it right. You know, it really matters that we get it right, and that concentrates one's mind, and so that's what we think about at the Fed. We think about what's the right thing. You know, I have, all I want to do in what's left of my time at the Fed is have the economy be strong and have inflation be under control, have a solid labor market. I want to turn it over to my successor in that condition. Of course, that's what keeps me up at night, is to do that. And that's what I think about. That's the only thing I think about.
So how are you protected? By law, by Constitution? Where does your authority come from?
I think, you know, I've covered all that. I do think we're fully protected, and again, I don't think about that anymore. What I think about is let's just do our jobs, and that's what we do. You know, we don't talk about those issues at all, and all we do is do our jobs as best we can. And you know, it's not an easy job, but it's one we've willingly taken on, and very important that we remain focused just on the job and not on other things.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, our vice chair for communications, Mr. Lawler. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, as recently as yesterday, Fed Governor Bowman indicated that if inflation pressures remain contained, the Fed should consider lowering rates.
Yes.
And said she is open to a rate cut in July. Governor Waller said very much the same. Do you believe that we are in a position where we may be able to cut rates in July?
I would say this. I think if it turns out that inflation pressures do remain contained, then we will get to a place where we cut rates sooner rather than later. But I wouldn't want to point to a particular meeting. I don't think we need to be in any rush because the economy is still strong. The labor market is strong. If we were to see the labor market, meaningfully weaken in a way that was concerning, that would matter for that decision. But if we see inflation, continuing not to move up, we hadn't expected inflation to move up much. We do expect it to move in the summer, and if we see it not happening, we'll learn from that.
The September 2018 Teal book suggested that the Fed, seeing through tariffs' inflationary effects, is an appropriate response so long as inflation expectations are firmly anchored and that the pass-through costs are relatively short-lived. Would you agree that this assessment from the Teal book still applies to today?
I would. Those are the exact factors that we cite when we talk about this situation, plus the size of the tariffs.
Right. So let's assess the current economic situation. The Monetary Policy Report states that longer-run inflation expectations, quote, continue to be broadly consistent with 2% inflation, unquote. And a Harvard study argued that despite the relatively quick price responses to tariff announcements, the overall magnitude of these changes remains modest. So if these conditions hold, is it not unreasonable to think that underlying inflation trends should continue its path towards 2%?
That's certainly a very defensible position. I think what others on the committee think, and what I think, is that this is a question we need to be careful with because it's different than it was in 2018. The difference is that we haven't had 2% inflation. In 2018, we hadn't had an inflation as high as 2% for a decade anymore.
Right.
This is a different situation. We haven't fully restored price stability, and another shock. We have to be careful. If there's a meaningfully large and sustained inflation shock, we have to be careful about that. And so, I think we're just trying to be careful and cautious.
It's
and we
not
really
going
think
to
that's
cut.
the best thing we can do for the people that we serve.
Oh, my.
If that happens, we need to be there for it. And so, we're in a difficult situation in deciding exactly when to move. But again, if we continue to see inflation come in, and not prove up at the higher levels than we expect, then that would matter for our decision making.
Chairman Powell, economist John Taylor once noted that the Federal Reserve should deviate from its own Taylor rule in the event of an oil shock, similar to the tariff scenario. A one-time price increase from an oil shock should not be accompanied with an increase in interest rates. Do you agree with that assessment?
I generally do, yes.
Previously, you said that if you wait for inflation to get back down to 2% to cut rates, you are already too late. You also said in November 2024 that inflation was on a sustainable path to 2%. Given that the FOMC believes that interest rates now are moderately restrictive and that an oil or tariff shock may not impact underlying inflation in a significant or meaningful way, because as the Monetary Policy Report established, inflation expectations are firmly anchored, what is the reason not to cut rates?
Go ahead.
Well, it's uncertainty about the size and potential
Breaking
persistence
uncertainty.
of the potential but highly uncertain inflation from tariffs. By the way, we have 5 Taylor rules in the Monetary Policy Report. 4 of them say that the policy rate is in the right range, and the other one calls for a hike.
Right.
Just for the record.
Well, back in the beginning of the Biden administration, okay, when we talk about inflation, they increased federal spending by $2.5 trillion each year. $5 trillion in new spending. That's what gave us inflation, by printing all of this new money and borrowing, and yet you did not respond to that by raising rates. In fact, you were late to raise rates. And now, again, we see a situation where you are late to cut rates. That is the challenge here.
Gentleman yields
Exactly.
back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Powell, to the best of your knowledge, has President Trump put forward a coherent tariff policy? Is that your opinion?
That is not a judgment for me to make or to discuss.
Well, what do you think?
Sir, it would be
You-
inappropriate
I mean,
for me.
you're
I don't
running
comment
our
on the president's
economy.
words or the president's
Does
policies.
the president, in your opinion, does he have a coherent tariff policy? You ought to have an opinion on that. You run our economy. This is your bailiwick. Do you think he's got a good policy? Answer me.
I would never comment on the president of the United States in that way.
All right. What do you think our policy should be?
Oh boy.
We play no role in either establishing or commenting on tariff policy or fiscal policy, for that matter. It's
Let
not
me
our
tell you-
business. We have a specific mandate. We try to stick to it.
Let me tell you something, Chairman. In my state of Georgia, I got the fastest growing trade group down there. The Port of Savannah is indeed our nation's fastest growing party, and it's rising even more. The cost, the expenses, our business community is suffering. And I want to know what you think of our tariff policy. What do I tell my people? What do we tell the American people? And you're a good man. I want to know the answer to this question. I want to know how you feel. This whole tariff question, it's a tax increase. It's running people out of business. What do you think about that? Give me some sort of answer. Do you think anything about our tariff policy? Don't you feel you have a responsibility here? Are you afraid of President Donald Trump?
Ooh.
Why don't you deal with this? Because our economy are suffering in a mighty bad way. And I've got to represent my constituency. And they are, let's take Georgia's agricultural sector, mostly pecans and poultry and cotton exports. They've been hit hard by retaliatory tariffs from key trading partners like China. Why are you running away from the tariff fight? Give us some understanding of that.
Honestly, this is just not our role. We are not an institution that comments on or analyzes decisions that the president makes, or the things that he runs for office on and is elected on and then does. We don't. That's just completely out of our lane. It's really inappropriate for me to have any comment on that. I'm sorry to say, Mr. Scott.
Ooh. He's not gonna like
We're
that.
having these regional disruptions. Our economy is in a bad way. And I want to see you and the president. You got to get together on this. We got pecans in Georgia. We got peanuts. We run the biggest group. We got the fastest growing trade mechanism in the Savannah Port Authority. We're crushed in Georgia. My business folks are coming to me on it. I got to get some answers from you. What do I tell them? That the Fed